Chapter 4, Perpetual War. It is being televised, if you know where to look. Ever since its founding on genocidal theft, the USA has been involved in one dirty little war after another, all justified with bipartisan lies, the biggest being, those people are not like us. Actually, you and I have more in common with the peasants that the USA has been casually bombing than with the fat cats in Washington and Wall Street who profit from the wars. Citizens of the USA would like to believe that our nation can do no wrong, but we'd be better served by facing the truth. We are of the same species as Gandhi, but also the same species as Hitler and Stalin. And all our wars are far away, so it's easy to forget what a hell we're making of other people's lives. Many injustices and atrocities have been carried out in our name, while we weren't looking, while we didn't care. Our self-absorption and the banality of our evil have reached monstrous proportions. As a nation, we have much to atone for, and it's still going on. But I truly believe that the wars will end when more people know the truth. Here's a half-minute clip of me talking about that at the 2008 protest at the School of the Americas.
We need to educate the public. There are too many people who just don't know what happens at this school here. I think that if more people knew what this school is about, it wouldn't exist anymore. If more people knew what the military-industrial complex is and how it functions, it wouldn't exist anymore. I think the main thing we need to do is tell the people. I think there are very few people who would want it to continue if they knew.
Our wars are bankrupting us, too. In the USA, over half of every tax dollar goes to the military. We'd solve our economic problems overnight if we stopped fighting so many stupid, pointless wars. President Eisenhower warned us, half a century ago, of the military-industrial complex, which profits from all the wars, win or lose, justified or unjustified, and somehow always manages to give us reasons that we need another war. Hermann Goering, one of Hitler's henchmen, explained how easy it is to give reasons for war when he was on trial for war crimes. He said, "Naturally, the common people don't want war. But after all, it is the leaders of a country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag people along, whether it is a democracy, or a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. This is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked, and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in every country." At this point, I need to talk briefly about the so-called war on terror. What is a terrorist, really? Usually it's some poor person who lives in a country that contains some natural resources, such as oil, that rich people in the USA want for themselves, generally for free or at an absurdly low price. And so the poor people in that country have been attacked, in some way that you never hear about on corporate television. And in some cases the poor people have retaliated in self-defense. But they don't have big expensive bombs. All they have is very cheap weapons and desperate tactics. And somehow their use of those weapons and tactics gets them branded as terrorists by our corporate television, as though this were somehow much worse than other kinds of soldiers. And what about the events of 9/11, 2001? Those events are used as a justification for our many recent wars, and for the loss of our civil liberties. Some people say that history began anew on that day, that all of previous history has become irrelevant. What a load of bullshit. Excuse my language. Let's first take the question of whether 9/11 was an inside job. Many people see that as an important question, and they have strong opinions on one side or the other. I don't have a strong opinion, and I don't see it as an important question, and here's why. There are two possibilities. On the one hand, if 9/11 was an inside job, then the culprits are our own military-industrial complex. On the other hand, if 9/11 was an attack by outsiders, then it was retaliation for past crimes carried out by our own military-industrial complex, crimes that many people of the USA have managed to not see. And so previous history is relevant. But either way, what we really need to do is expose the machinations of our own military-industrial complex. And even if all the fault did lie with the foreigners, our wars are still making us less safe. Here's why. Supposedly the 19 Saudi hijackers were armed only with cheap box cutters, determination, and ingenuity. No nukes, no AK-47s, etc. Well, even if we bomb their country and several neighboring countries back to the Stone Age, they'll still be able to get their hands on box cutters or other cheap, low-tech weapons. So our bombing does nothing to prevent future 9/11s. In fact, our bombing makes future 9/11s more likely. Every innocent bystander who we deprive of a home, a limb, or a loved one, or who hears about our tortures, thereby gains a reason to pick up a box cutter. Our government's wars are making new enemies faster than they kill old ones. And our government has become so arrogant that they don't even bother with plausible lies for some of their crimes. Here are two examples of that. First, Bradley Manning was a soldier in the U.S. Army who allegedly passed a mass of classified documents to WikiLeaks exposing war crimes of the U.S. Army in the Middle East. In some ways, this is very similar to Daniel Ellsberg leaking the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War. If the allegations are true, Manning should receive a medal for them. The law instructs soldiers to expose war crimes, not become complicit in them. But instead he has been imprisoned since May 2010 and subjected to lengthy illegal pre-trial torture and is facing a court-martial, possibly with the penalty of life in prison. This appears to have as its real purpose the intimidation of other soldiers, so that they will not also become whistleblowers. By the way, at the time that I'm writing this, Bradley Manning has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by some members of the Parliament of Iceland. I'm inserting into the transcript of this video a link to a petition you can sign supporting that nomination. And second, in recent wars, the U.S. military has used depleted uranium in weapons in countries that they are supposedly, quote, liberating, unquote. The residue from those weapons is causing genetic alteration in the local population, permanently raising the frequency of birth defects. And it's causing similar damage in the USA's own soldiers. This shows a psychopathic lack of concern about the well-being of others. But it's nothing new. The chemical Agent Orange had a similar effect in the Vietnam War. Is it psychopathy or just stupidity? In either case, through such actions and others, the government of the USA forfeits any claim to legitimacy. Of all the nations that have ever had nuclear weapons, fortunately, so far only one has ever been insane enough to use them against humans. But we have no guarantee that that good record will continue. A moment of madness or error could produce a nuclear war that would end all life on Earth, as in the 1964 film Dr. Strangelove, from which this illustration is taken.
Target distance, 4 miles.
Roger. 4 miles. Auto CDC and manual telefax link.
Auto CDC into manual telefax link.
Target distance, 3 miles.
Roger, 3 miles. Target in sight. Where in hell is Major Kong?
Hey, what about Major Kong?
In fact, that would have already happened on September 26, 1983, except that fortunately, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov in the Soviet Air Force refused to follow his orders. Subsequently, he was mildly reprimanded for saving the world. Nuclear materials require exotic atoms, and so they can be detected with Geiger counters. Some of our greatest warmongers, including Nobel War Prize winners Henry Kissinger and Barack Obama, have been talking lately about how they'd like to make the world safe from nuclear weapons through worldwide surveillance. They claim that if they spy on everyone, they can keep nuclear materials out of the hands of so-called terrorists. There might be a small grain of truth in this claim, but I see many other things in it as well. It's partly a ploy to demonize whichever countries they're calling terrorists, currently Iran and North Korea. It's also a ploy to increase business for their friends who sell surveillance equipment and services. It's also a justification for spying on us while keeping secrets from us, which is just the reverse of how Thomas Jefferson said things should be. He was later quoted by the main character in the film V for Vendetta.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
But mostly, this whole no nukes campaign is a distraction from the more important issue of what creates so-called terrorism. A no nukes campaign cannot take the teeth out of so-called terrorism. Making terrible weapons becomes ever easier as knowledge continues to grow and spread. For instance, germ warfare does not require any exotic atoms, and it cannot be detected with Geiger counters or other kinds of surveillance. And soon it will be cheap and easy. Soon every 2-bit lunatic will have his own germ warfare lab. Thus, whether the so-called terrorists can get their hands on nukes hardly matters. As I mentioned earlier, even if we bomb their country and several neighboring countries back to the Stone Age, people can still get their hands on box cutters and other cheap weapons. As long as a few people still hate us, they will find ways to hurt us. Evidently, we must stop giving other people reasons to hate us. Bush's claim that they hate us for our freedoms was a lot of nonsense. For many years, while most Americans weren't paying attention, we've permitted our government to prop up dictators and overthrow democracies whenever that served the interests of the few multinational corporations that own our government. We need to stop that shit. The USA has claimed to be a protector of freedom and democracy, but it has a greater track record of protecting stability, which is a euphemism for predictability through control. That is the opposite of freedom. Our military has followed the example of Arnaud Amalric, the abbot of Citeaux, in the 13th century Crusades. When he was sacking the town of Béziers and could not distinguish friend from foe, he casually and indifferently said, "Kill them all. God will know which ones are his." We're not making any friends this way. You can't bomb your way to friendship. I want people to be free, but that means I accept the possibility that they may do something I don't like. I hope to reduce the likelihood of that, not through control, which is both unethical and unreliable, but through friendship. Only friendship can make us safe. If you attack everyone who you fear, soon you'll fear everyone. I wear a big conspicuous peace symbol everywhere I go. I keep hoping that it will become a fad, a fashion, that everyone will start wearing one. That hasn't happened yet, but I'll continue wearing it and hoping. For me, the symbol has come to represent far more than just the ending of bombs and bullets. Wars will continue as long as a few people can profit from them, and as long as people see their own interests as separate from the interests of other people. The ending of that attitude, and the spread of a worldwide caring community, is what I now see in the symbol.